It appears that I was cut off for a few moments. Let me go back to shared content. I'm going back to SO6 class. If you go to course documents, you can see there's the interactive, the micro. The smallest one is most likely going to be the one with the exhibits. Here are the lecture notes for the chapter. I'll show you how they're set up as well. With the lecture notes, they also include graphs that show you what's going on. The breakdown is different, and identifying the areas, show you the graphing points. So everything that you saw in that little presentation is also here. It also breaks down some of the homework questions, which you hear. Let me show you the Laffer curve, etc. Any of them would be useful, especially when you're preparing for the test. But the one that I would prefer, if I was going to print something out, would probably either be the lecture notes or the exhibits, the power exhibits. Any questions on A? Because I think A's pretty self-explanatory. When you go to the traditional PowerPoint, there's some narratives in here that kind of describe what's going on. One, the taxes are good levied on buyers, and taxes are good levied on sellers. So either way, there's going to be changes. Now, if the tax is levied strictly on the buyers, the demand curve will fall because they'll consider it the same thing as the increase in the price of goods. On the seller, they'll consider it a part of the cost of goods. So if they're originally willing to sell it at 50 and the market was willing to pay at 50, and then the government applied a $10 tax on the suppliers, such as a value-added tax or what is referred to as a VAT tax. When they put the product on the shelf, it's going to say $50 or $60 or $55, but the amount they receive is going to be $10 less than what the price is listed at. The slope of the curve will determine how much they will receive. But if we look at examples, say with Hatteras Yachts, when they had the luxury tax and Hatteras Yacht Company went bankrupt, it's because their curve was the demand curve for their product was elastic. Even though their supply curve was inelastic in nature, when that additional tax was applied, say it's applied here, the consumer will pay part of it, but this is the price received by a seller, and the price paid by a consumer. So wherever that tax is levied, If it's in the building process, it's going to affect supply curve. If it's on the end game, we'll say they raise vehicle taxes from, say, your yearly vehicle tax 2% to 8%. You're going to start looking at that as part of the cost of running that vehicle. And the amount you're willing to pay for a vehicle for the next purchase will be declining. As we discussed in the other part of the other presentation, buyers and sellers both are hit with the taxes. This is the price that the buyers will have to pay will increase, and the price received by the sellers will decrease. So that's when we'll see the tax burdens, the elasticity of supply and demand will tell us who's going to pay the most and who's going to pay the least. When we look at the deadweight loss, whenever you have taxes, you will have a deadweight loss. Let's just have a little comedic interlude there. All this is what we saw in the other one. Now, when you look at the deadweight loss, you can see what happens to consumer, produce surplus, and to total surplus. Now, in this section, when we talk about the deadweight loss, it kills efficiency because it forces us to allocate resources inefficiently. When we look at the Laffer curve, that's what's happening. I mean, we have to make decisions based on the changes in the prices of the good. If there's an increase in the gas tax, let's say they double the gas tax in North Carolina tomorrow, that means the gas is going to go from about $2.10, $2.05, $2 to over $3. Now, we have to reevaluate how we spend our money, how we travel, what type of vehicle we purchase. I saw somebody was writing a paper on the current market with SUVs and pickups being the #1 sellers in the U.S. marketplace. But if you go back to say 2008, 9, 10, we had gas prices up around $4 a gallon. Dealers didn't even want to see somebody pulling up to the lot to trade in an SUV or pickup. They didn't want it. And the consumer didn't like what they offered, because if they don't want your vehicle, they're not going to give you much of a price for it. The consumers were trying to trade in their vehicles to get more fuel efficient vehicles. They had a cash for clunkers program where if your vehicle was older and its miles per gallon is, I think it was under 14, 15, somewhere in there, maybe a little more. You could turn it in and they give you a premium for that vehicle, and then they would crush it. The government would give you a credit that you could transfer directly to your next purchase of a new, more fuel efficient vehicle. But that had unintended consequences as well. When we look at trade and world trade, we're going to see some big changes that occur based on world prices and where we tax goods, etc. If we tax goods coming in from China, it's going to raise the price of the product. And when it does that, it's going to affect their willingness to supply at a given price. So the supply curve is going to move. All of this is somewhat repeating. It just goes to a little more discussion about it. How big are the deadweight losses for taxations? Every economist will look at it somewhat differently. and how much impact it has, just like we looked at with the Laffer curve. We had individuals on one side of the Laffer curve that believed you had to raise taxes to get revenue. And that's where we were located, so they wanted to raise taxes. That argument's still in play today. We look at one presidential candidate says he's going to raise taxes. The other candidate says he's going to lower taxes. It's not that either one believe they're saying it incorrectly. They both believe that if they do what they say, the revenues in the federal government will increase. So it's philosophical. It's not as much, just saying, I'm going to do X, I'm going to do Y. They truly believe that the liberal side believes that they can raise the taxes, increase revenues. The conservative side thinks they can raise it or lower it and get new revenues. It's just where they perceive that we are, that imaginary Laffer curve. Now, when we look at labor supply, I think it's almost vertical. That means people will work full-time regardless of wage. And if that's the case, it's a small deadweight loss. Others believe it's backwards. But I don't remember hearing any debate from either party discussing the elasticity of any curves when they start talking about taxation and quotas and fees. Now, all of this on the tax on labor is based on the perception of what the curve looks like. But we have to remember that on the first is one they discuss, there's P and Q. We say the demand curve is somewhat elastic. They're saying the supply curve is inelastic. So we can see that they believe the deadweight loss is going to be handled here. But what you have to remember is when we're putting taxes on labor and wages, you are the supplier of labor. You are the producer of your labor. So you are the supply curve. The businesses are ones demanding your services. Now, on this page, the others believe that the supply curve for labor is more elastic in nature. So we'll say this is demand curve. They think the supply curve is somewhat elastic. So the cost is going to be distributed to both parties. But most of it's going to be handled by the business because they're running the demand curve. The only way to find out is to do it. And then you can't control any other external variables. When the budget was established for the federal government for 2021, and when it was approved, there's no way they could have perceived what was going to happen in 2020 with the COVID-19 virus. There's no way any of them could perceive what was going on. It had already started in China. They were already dealing with it. They restricted trade within China, but they restricted travel inside China to stop the transmission or slow it if they could. But they told the World Health Organization that they had no transfer from human to human or animal to human, which was not true. So if they're allowing people to travel internationally, but they're not allowing them to travel domestically, that means they knew it and they still sent people out with as potential carriers of COVID-19. So nobody could perceive what was going to happen. North Carolina, well, the federal government hadn't had a good budget, or hadn't had a real budget in probably 12 years. And that's a problem as well in the macro side. But the state of North Carolina had a budget for 1920 and then 2021. The problem is they were still negotiating parts of the other, the 1920 situation, and it had been vetoed. And after it was vetoed, then the next thing we know, we have COVID-19, things that they were going to use money to increase wages or buy additional goods and services was not there because the revenues fell because everything was shut down. As taxes increase, the weight loss increases. We saw that right here. The government did it with cigarettes. They can do it to alcohol, beer. I've got several papers dealing with legalization of marijuana. One of the big things they say is to increase revenues. But the problem is when they increase revenues to start with, the government put a small tax on it, and then they see the tax get larger and larger. If they want to get rid of it, they can just put a tax on it of 90%, and you can't afford to buy it and consume it. And the seller's not going to produce it and sell it. In the past, for illegal drugs, if you were a cocaine dealer, you could go to the IRS and get a cocaine tax to show you paid taxes on the cocaine you bought and sold. Now, as a person, I don't think that's the smartest thing to do. But here's what happened: they had marijuana, they had drug stamps, just like they have cigarette stamps and so forth. That way, if you're selling marijuana, meth, cocaine, whatever, if you didn't have a tax stamp on it, that means you did not pay the taxes on those revenues. So when you were arrested and they perceived that you had sold, or they catch you with a certain amount of illegal drugs, they can look over a 56-week period or a 2-year period or whatever they want to do and say that we perceive that you sold them during that time frame, and this is the amount you sold, and if you sold this much, this amount of taxes to us for each unit you sold. Therefore, it's going to cost you $1 million in taxes. That's how the IRS and other government agencies, especially primarily the IRS, can seize people's properties in drug trafficking cases. They just do an estimate of what you sold and charge you taxes, just like they would charge taxes on an ice cream bar or a Pepsi. I've known several individuals hit with that, and everything they had was gone. Everything. The houses were padlocked, the vehicles were taken, all the accounts were frozen, and everything was turned over to the IRS to pay delinquent taxes. Now here they show the Laffer curve and how it was set up. A cut in federal income taxes in the United States right now would lead to higher national income within 5 years than without the tax cut. 43% agree. That means they believe that we're on the right-hand side of the Laffer curve. 48% say, I don't know. It could go either way. So they don't really know if we're left or right. And you have the 9% that absolutely disagree. That means they're perceiving we're on the left-hand side of that curve. Cutting federal income taxes in the United States right now would raise taxable income enough So the annual total tax revenue would be higher within 5 years than without the tax cut. This is very positive statement here. They're saying it would be absolutely increasing. And when they say that, 96% disagree. One, because you just don't know what's going to happen. COVID-19 could happen. Anything could happen. Natural disaster. Just don't know. There's too many dependent variables. Because the only independent variable is, they can say, okay, we cut taxes. They believe the tax revenue will go up. But that's the response they're expecting to see. But there's so many other variables at play that you can't say that. You can't say that. Okay. Do I have any questions from anyone on this chapter? As I said, when you look at this chapter, chapter 7, 8, and 9 all kind of work together. I'm going to bring up 9 for just a moment. That'll be next week. And we start with the same thing. We're dealing with equilibrium prices, equilibrium quantities, and customer surplus and producer surplus. Now, we're not necessarily going to apply taxes to this, but we're going to apply the world price. And as consumers and producers, if I'm a producer of goods and the world price is higher than the domestic price, I'm sorry, folks, but I'm going to sell it internationally because I'm in business to make money. So I'm going to be exporting those goods. Now, if the world price is less than that, I'm not going to produce as many goods, but what happens is if the world price is lower, everybody's going to send their goods to us as our suppliers exit the marketplace. We can see a group of sellers here that have actually entered the marketplace just to sell international goods because that price is higher. Just like we looked at in 7 and 8, this is just a progression. And we can actually apply quotas and everything else to this as well. So if you can handle 7 and 8, 9 is going to be easy as well. But the best thing to do is, this is the exhibit format, and all you would do is, for this chapter, is you print these 4 slides. That'd be a good source of information, especially when you're taking the test or even the homework. Questions? Anybody have any questions about anything on their thesis and outline?
You said the thesis and outlines are going to be finished today?
That's my objective, yes. Have you looked at the discussion board yet, Ethan?
No, I haven't checked it today.
Check and see if I've made any commentary on it. If you submitted it during the week last week, it's probably already been read and I made comments on them. You should see a grade posted. And it's either 100 or a 0. 100 means I've dealt with it and it was good to start writing. I may have some suggestions or just some thoughts that I include in my discussion with you, but that's it. If you posted something on time and I've read it, you got 100. If you've got it in there and I haven't read it yet, it will be 100. I just haven't got to it yet, but it'll stay a 0 until I get there. Okay?